So let's make a brief reminder of which are some of the assertions that were made by President Maduro that day on September the 18th of 2018. So, forward with the video. So, Colonel Osvaldo Valentín Garcia Palomo, he is responsible for the meetings of the U.S. officers with some of the retired Venezuelan military officers to attempt a coup against the democratic government of Venezuela, which was coordinated from Bogota, Colombia, and Cúcuta. This man has several entries. If you look up his contacts in Miami, you will be very surprised. I asked to Interpol and international justice for an order for capture for this man. So yes, in effect, effectively, on many occasions, our president proposed to several police entities in the United States and Interpol the capture of this retired colonel, Osvaldo Valentín Garcia Palomo, who was involved in several conspiracy movements against our government, as we will now show the evidence to the audience. He was the main promoter of the military coup that it was planned for May of 2018, and also the military coup that is ongoing and was supposed to happen in the final days of January of 2019. Until the first week of February. So why is it that no police entities in the United States or Colombia responded to this legitimate request by the constitutional government of Venezuela? Well, that's because it was exactly the opposite was happening. Factual powers and government officials in Colombia and the United States were in fact supporting the clandestine actions and murderous actions for the organization of this coup on behalf of Mr. Garcia Palomo. He was very active in November and December of 2018, as well as January of 2019. We already know all of his destinations, all the times that he went into Colombia, that he went into Chile, that he went over to Brazil, that he was in Washington on more than 3 occasions, the meetings he held, and who assisted in Washington and Tampa and Miami, who he held meetings with in Bogota, also in Brazil, and also those who met with him in Chile. I would like to show you some of the more far-fetched claims that we hear from the ultra-right movements in Venezuela. Of the final days of January and the first days of February. And then we proceed to explain why they lost their heads. You remember last weekend, they were all fake news on supposed pictures, supposed videos of military equipment in the United States and the Venezuelan frontier border. Most mass media could not help but to point out that there was something that was completely false. Everything that was being published was false, and it is also related to what I had what happened immediately later. I want to show you the claims of some of the ultra-right supporters of in Venezuela. So, at the end, we eventually reach a breakpoint in which the cost of staying for Maduro is higher than the cost of leaving, and we're very close to that point. And, of course, if he wants to preserve his life, he should understand that it is now time to accept that their time is up. So here, Luis Carlos, please follow. The Venezuelan dictatorship has very little hours. It's on a countdown because there is a new constitutional regime that is being created thanks to the collaboration of countries such as Colombia. So we are now at a process in which, this process is irreversible. There is no way to turn it back. There is no way to break it. There is no going back. This process will go on to build itself on good terms or the worst terms, no matter what. And I think that is reality that no one will deny. Maduro can leave peacefully, or he can leave by force. He can incite more violence and more death. But if Maduro takes this decision of stay there and entrench himself, well, that is on him, that is his decision. And I want to make it very clear that, as you said very well, there are only hours for him left, and of course Congress people, and I hear many important people on the subject that I think they know something that we don't know, but they are all predicting that this is just a matter of hours. I mean, we're on countdown. I mean, we have to pay a lot of attention on the development on what is happening. If the words that we have learned of, that the words that we have been listening to in the past hours, if they have some specific knowledge that they are not disclosing to the public, then I guess we were gonna see all of that unfold in the weekend. Well, those were that was Mrs. Maria Machado, and it would appear that she has a little allergy around her upper lip. She looked a lot like a comic that I used to read when I was a kid, right? You remember that? Because they were like little cartoons that moved their lips in that way. It seemed like she was stung like a bee or something. It looked, well, that's how she looked on January 21st. So, Duque, the president in Colombia, on February the 1st, as well as Fernando del Rincón on February the 2nd, and Julio Borges on February the 3rd. So what made them lose their heads? Well, they knew that Mr. Colonel Osvaldo Valentín Garcia Palomo was coming into Venezuela on the final days of January in order to stage the military coup against President Maduro. What also happens is that, well, we knew that already, and we also knew that because, as it turns out, to Garcia Palomo, who had been the organizer of the military coup in May, we managed to make him see that the military unit would rise in the city of Caracas. As it turns out, that the vehicle, that the car that he used to go from Colombia until the state of Táchira, and then the car of Mérida, well, it was a car that was provided by the Venezuelan intelligence. And as it turns out, all this operation of penetration on behalf of Garcia Palomo into the Venezuelan country is an operation that we had already been following very closely. And so that is why Borges loses his mind, Duque loses his mind, Machado loses his mind, and this other journalist whose name I can't remember, they all lose their heads because, in fact, they thought that they would see a military uprising from some unit in the city of Caracas, and that they would answer to the call of Garcia Palomo. And so, when they were captured, we found Mr. Garcia Palomo had a series of equipment within the cars that were used for the transportations, the bracelets that were going to be used for the uprising in Caracas, the weapons, the bulletproof vests, the communications equipment that were provided by Mr. Antonio Rivero in the city of Bogotá in Colombia, journalist press IDs, and other necessary identifications. These were all on Garcia Palomo when he was captured on January the 30th. So he confessed then that the coup would take place in 3 days. And if they managed to gather all the military units with which they were going to take several points, Fuente Tiuna, the Carlota Airport, and the interruption of the communications networks around Caracas and the Palace of Miraflores. Well, all of this was given up was forfeit as an attack point because they figured out they didn't have enough support, and they were going to 7th. If they couldn't muster all their military force by that date, the other alternative dates were January 23rd, 21st, or February the 3rd, which was also consistent with these speeches we just saw, and all that fake news that was published in the past weekend. What is also happening is that Garcia Palomo was then captured, and not only was he captured, he has also provided a lot, hours worth of testimony, voluntary testimony that I must add, on behalf of Garcia Palomo, who also asked to be submitted to the polygraph test. In all of their testimonies, in all of the testimony he has provided, and considering the severity of the confessions and the testimonies that he is providing, we request, on grounds of national security, that he is mentioning the plans to stage a military coup against the constitutional government of Venezuela. And he is also mentioning elements of aggression against the constitutional president and some other elements of the frustrated magnacide of August the 4th. And we have asked authorization to show, for reasons of national security, to the people and also to the mass media, a couple minutes of the many hours of testimony of Colonel Garcia Palomo. So we will now proceed to see the first video on which this man, Garcia Palomo, presents himself and makes important confessions. Well, good night. I am retired Colonel of the National Guard, Osvaldo Garcia Palomo. I graduated from FOFAC in the year of 1987. I am part of the promotion of Queseras del Medio battle, 2 battles. And I was for 27 years at this institution. And I was let go in 2014, specifically on April 15th of 2014, because of my own request. From then, I went into contact with then my friend, Coronel Augusto Rivero. I was friends with him when I was a second place commander, and he was a director of Civil Protection's office. And he provided all the support to establish a very important communication network in all of Caracas, which did not exist at any moment in the Guard, and any units of the Guard. Thanks to him, we had that. Within that time, with interval, I made a contact in Colombia with officers from the CIA. This contact was given to me by Antonio Rivero. A conversation that I believed was quite long, and he asked me about Venezuela, on our situation, how things were going, what credible threats could be taking place in order to make our way out of the current Venezuelan government. And then I commented what I was doing. In Colombia, I went into contact with this man from the CIA, and with a man, Parsifal de Sola, which was a contact of mine back in Venezuela. So there, a character appeared who was an officer of the National Police in Colombia, whose name is Alejandro. I always knew him as Alejandro, and he was in a civilian attire. And well, there I came in there, and they provided support, and support in the sense that when I went across the border, they did not ask for my passport. They started doing their connection work. So of course, first they did it on the phone, then they would give the contact to them and they would verify. And military friends that they had, acquaintances, etc. And then we built up a very important group in order to carry out the operation. In May, the goals that were quite large, and they had to be cut short until they were reduced to 2 main objectives, which were La Carlota and the whole communications network that was surrounding the great city of Caracas. So it is, I understand, because of 2 reliable sources, very important 3 sources, but 2 are more important, that this trimester, this 3-month interval, will include a very important decision, a very important military decision against Venezuela. So this person who is this man of the CIA whom I met with, that, well, his opinion, he has not told me that he was told by President Trump or by the State Department chief. No, it was his own opinion, and an opinion of another person that he cannot, whose identity we cannot confirm, but who is also a Pentagon assessment counselor, and who works in Tampa. So Colonel Lee tells me the same, in such a way that I do believe in those two people, because in all the time that we have been sharing, they are always very precise and very measured in what they say. They don't speak a lot. And so I thought, well, so before these Americans come and they make their little mess, that is where we are all involved, that's where we're all involved, all of us equally. So collateral damage, that includes our families. They compromise a lot of very beloved people, innocent people. So I tell them, if this general comes to here, I told him, look, that there's an operation that is ready for in Venezuela, but come on, don't screw with me. We're going to solve this ourselves, the Venezuelans ourselves, of course. Yes, militarily, but we're doing it amongst ourselves. So, some elements to bring out there. So firstly, Garcia Palomo leaves the National Guard in the year of 2014, and then he immediately goes into Colombia and gains contact with Antonio Rivero, which we know already that he is an agent of the CIA, and then also very well trained by the CIA, from the government of the United States of America. So in that contact with Antonio Rivero, they link Garcia Palomo with the CIA, from alias Indiana, who turned out to be the connection from the CIA in the United States with this coup organizer, Garcia Palomo. There is also a very important element there where it refers to and also mentions an important businessman, Parsifal de Sola, who, well, of course, he doesn't like to be, show up on pictures. He is this hotel entrepreneur here. So here we say that you were absolutely right. When you said that Julio Borges and Parsifal de Sola were involved in the military coup called the Blue Coup, Operation Jericho of 2014, and that afterwards Julio Borges allowed to disclose the information on the military staff in that coup directly with Parsifal de Sola, well, then you were absolutely right. There were some meetings at a penthouse and a building in Altamira that belonged to this man, Parsifal de Sola, with the maps of the city of Caracas, and then they established the bombing points that were proposed by Julio Borges for the military action in what we call the Blue Coup of the military, of many officers of the Venezuelan aerial force. They had to bomb the Palace of Miraflores, the Caracas City Hall, the National Electoral Council, and the GESIL, which are, well, of course, there is a clear link established between Garcia Palomo with this businessman, Parsifal de Sola. He is one of the main financiers, one of the main contributors to finance this operations for Julio Borges. But also, we can see a direct relation between the coup stager, Garcia Palomo, and a general of the National Police Department in Colombia, alias Alejandro. We have identified him already, and he is also part of the investigation that is currently undergoing. The name of this and rank of this officer in Colombia. He was a connection for Garcia Palomo with the government of Juan Manuel Santos, involved in the coup staged in May of 2018, which was the military coup that was trying to, well, in violation of the Constitution, to prevent the people to make their will known in the election on May 20th in May of 2018. That military coup then implied the uprising of several military units with their commanders and their colonels, and it was led by Garcia Palomo, and also it had the assessment and support of the National Police Department from Juan Manuel Santos in Colombia, as well as the development support from the CIA through two agents of the CIA, which were the connections to Garcia Palomo, alias Indiana, and Colonel Lee. And they are located in the city of Tampa in the state of Florida. But also, Garcia Palomo mentions and also confesses that these North American officers expressed that in the first trimester of 2019, there was a military operation that was planned against Venezuela. So you can forget about all the humanitarian aid claims. All of that is a lie. It is very clear that the real intent from the Trump administration and John Bolton and Marco Rubio and Mike Pence is military aggression against Venezuela. So in an exercise of macabre and terrifying nationalism, Garcia Palomo said, no, we don't need Americans to kill each other. We can kill ourselves. We can do that. And then is when we managed to capture this man, and the strategy to let him understand that the coup was already ripe for sowing, and that is why he is captured in these past time period. But also, you will also recall that the leader of the dialogue conferences on the Dominican Republic on behalf of Venezuelan government is a man who will go into history as one of the greatest political cowards in Venezuela. When the Jericho Plan was denounced in 2014, Borges came and talked to me. He was there accompanied by Mr. Cariz, and crying, he told me that he is not involved in any type of military coup and that we should consider his children, that he was a good man. We're going now to see this video and this confession on Garcia Palomo regarding Julio Borges. So, well, yes, indeed, Mr. Julio Borges, I spoke with him for the first time, I didn't know him then, in a city in Colombia, on the request of a general of the National Police Office, the department, who requested that of me. And only because of that reason is that I sat down with this man. When I spoke with him, my first impression was that he was willing to do anything to leave the Venezuelan government. Even if he didn't get a post, even though he got nothing out of it, that only leaving the government was a success for him. I told him that he could count on me, that what I was interested in, and then I've been told already, is that he had some military contacts, and that I wanted to get those contacts. He told me that in the following days, his partner would call me. In the end, there were two people that I met with. I was not interested at all in who they were. I figured after that one of them was Fernando Alban. So we started to contact each other dynamically over the phone. So these men, these people, Luis Ortega, Rafael Ramirez, Garcia Plaza, her husband, they have had, especially Luis Ortega and her husband, they have tried to contact me many times, and they have made me see that they're in the same team and they're on the same path. And I can assure you that I can assure them and whoever that there is absolutely no possibility of success to make a military coup. Another important point is that Claver, who I know from the military academy, as well as Rodriguez Torres, with whom I worked from Cleaver, we met several times in Colombia, many times. Cleaver is most of all in the political field, not in the military field, and Rodriguez Torres, who was well, and of course Cleaver as well. I spoke with both of them. They were one of the connections of the group for Commander Marin Chaparro with us. And Carvajal, or the chicken as we call him, I know him. Yeah, we're now good friends, but he is not my enemy either. And each time I see him, I salute him with a lot of respect. We had an indirect meeting in July of last year through a connection that worked with him, a person that worked with him. And well, he called on me to meet on behalf of him and Rodriguez Torres because, well, I work with both of them. So a continued coup. All roads eventually lead to all the coups. I mean, it's one thing what they say, the face they make for it, and the lies they tell. But they all lead back to the coup, which is, of course, was supposed to take place on May 2018. There is clearly a link between Garcia Palomo and Julio Borges, and the connection between Garcia Palomo and Julio Borges turned out to be two. On one side, Mr. Fernando Alban, a counselor, first a justice counselor who took his own life in the past, in a couple of months ago, and who has a clear and direct relation not only to the coups, as declared by several confessions, what was the connection of Fernando Alban with the drone strike that was supposed to kill Nicolas Maduro on the first combatant unit of the military, on the cabinet, etc., etc. So not only have we established the connections and the relationships between all these different factors and people involved with the coup, because again, Borges was relevant in 2014 from Operation Jericho. Patricia Polero was right about it. What she said was true. And all the investigation shows that Parsifal de Sol and Julio Borges were also involved in the coup of May 2018. But also, Mr. Garcia Palomo also mentions the drone strike against the President of our Republic, the frustrated magnicide, and I want to ask some patience of you because this will now be connected with the confession made by a traitor who was also presented. Let's see what Garcia Palomo has to say about the drone strike. So, I found out about the drones in Bogota before May, like in March or April. So General Camacho, as you know, is the one in charge of that information. And he takes it to a meeting, Camacho Rincon. Yes, Camacho Rincon. And he takes it to a meeting, and they present it as an option that is sent from some people in Miami who tell him that those drones and these people are already under training in Colombia. And he takes that presentation to the meeting, and he puts it on the table. So I say, perfect, we're going to use those drones for the military operation. He said, no, that's to take out Maduro. And I was like, to take out Maduro? Yes, to attack Maduro. That's why they want the drone. And so he left with his own project, and I stayed with mine. I said, well, I tried to do it in May, and they did their own, which I mean, they didn't know what they were going to do. I don't know if they were going to do it on a day, on an hour. They were going to do it. But, well, I mean, because I broke my relations with that, I didn't know that what happened, and they did that. That is all I know about drones. It was a lieutenant, I believe, Lieutenant Delgado. You know it because in the interrogation they have named him before. I have no knowledge of this lieutenant, but not at all. I don't know who he is. Yes, that day. With Delgado Taboski. This lieutenant, I mean, I've heard a great deal of him. He has been named quite a bit, but I don't know him at all. I have no knowledge of this lieutenant. So this murderer is no lieutenant. He is the perpetrator, the coordinator of all the team that was assembled for the magnicide attempt in August the 4th against Nicolas Maduro Moros. Osman Alexis Delgado Taboskis, his participation has been well established, his direct implication, the magnicide that has been frustrated. So I would like to ask you to notice something that Mr. Garcia Palomo said. He said that he found out about the drones in the month of May, but that as of March and April, they were already receiving training in Colombia, and it is well known that in Colombia it is completely fallacious and counterproductive to deny all the coming and fro's and shortcomings of how Julio Borges aided the terrorists for the drone attack, how the drones were passed on to Colombia, how the explosives were passed on, etc. That's not important anymore. Colonel Garcia Palomo showed there that the training of these terrorists in order to perpetrate this murder attempt had been underway for quite some time in Colombia. That means that while Julio Borges was sitting on the dialogue table in the Dominican Republic, he was also organizing the drone strike against Maduro. And that is one of the main reasons for which once an agreement had been reached, and so much that the president, Danilo Medina, in the Dominican Republic, he had already set up the table just for the signing. After a call from Bogota, Borges boycotts the signing of the agreement, because there was no intent to engage in elections, because they knew they would lose. There was no intention whatsoever to follow the constitutional path through an agreement with several guarantees for all political factions, because they already had their drone strike ready, which of course was frustrated. However, Garcia Palomo did not mention Borges directly with the drone strikes. Well, little patience I would ask of you. I want to show you one last video of Mr. Garcia Palomo, in which he exposes a mole, a traitor, someone who was right here in the palace of Miraflores, and who was the one who was connected to Julio Borges and Fernando Albán for the magnicide of President Nicolas Maduro. Let's take one last look at Garcia Palomo. So, regarding Commander Ovidio, in May of 2018, this man, Borges, he gave him as a connection, and in fact, I was in permanent communication with him. So the matters I treated with him, well, I asked for information regarding palace security, regarding the units that were assigned for protection, the weapons that they were equipped with, but basically it was that and the presidential route, where the presidential route. So when the president was there, and well, of course he was cooperative in that sense, but at that time, well, 2 or 3 days before our own D-Day, so to speak, we had already discarded the palace operation because it was a unit that we considered it was very strong. With all their fallacies, it was a very strong unit. It was pretty invulnerable, and the cost in human life was to be too high, so decided not to do anything. That is why I lost interest in it. Now, now, I did ask for the meeting with this man Julio Borges. So Garcia Palomo refers to the man who refers to Lieutenant Colonel Carrasco Mosqueda Ovidio. So he is the honorary chief of presidential security. He was contacted by Julio Borges for the military coup and for the magnicide as of the year 2013. So Garcia Palomo also declares that the main interest for Julio Borges, that is the presidential route and the presidential schedules, that is why you see this woman who was stung by a bee in the mouth, Maria Machado, that's saying that Maduro is going to die. Also, Mr. Duque is saying that Maduro will die. To Mr. Fernando del Rincón, he said that something's going to happen very soon. And Mr. Fernando Rincón and Julio Borges showing everything that he says, pretty much confessing their condition and their situation as, well, murderers, as homicidal persons. So the Lieutenant Ovidio also offered a voluntary testimony, which he voluntarily accepted to undergo a polygraph test, so that it was perfectly clear that everything that he said was nothing but the truth. So I would like to show you the testimony of Ovidio Carrasco, in which we involved Julio Borges is directly involved in all the acts of aggression against the Republic, and involves them directly in the frustrated magnicide of August 4th in 2018. Do we have the video of Mr. Carrasco? Please proceed. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Ovidio Carrasco Mosqueda. My identity number is the following. Currently, I'm a director of communications as of 4.5 years, and the honorary presidential guard. So this situation began in the year 2000, when I was as an intern at PDVSA. There, I was sent to a military academy in order to make particular internships and close to Fidel Castro. So we were there at that moment with the engineer Wilson Castro. He would show us the initial procedure, and after that, I was there again in the year 2013, and I came for a presidential activity in Puerto Ordaz in the state of Bolívar. And I find him in the airport. He asked how I've been, that it had been quite some time without seeing me. And the following day he was called. I was called, and he told me he had several political aspirations. And as a mayor of the Caroni municipality, Puerto Ordaz and St. Felix, he tells me that the next day he would have a political directive, and that he would like for me to meet him. So the following day, before going out to the La Llovizna Park, he calls me and he tells me that we should meet in the lower part. Once I was there, I see that Deputy Julio Borges goes out of the car. So we go into the car, we speak for a half an hour, 35 minutes, and he proposed that I would be a part of the projects that they had with architects, military staff, with the aim of establishing lines of work and lines of actions in order to take out the government. And so it was. So we met. It was explained to me that if I thought about it, and that he basically needed the adequate information from the government in order to use it correctly. That is locations, relations among ministers, relations with the power, different political factions, if there were people who were alone or meeting. After that, he presented Mejia's Laya to Julio Borges at the Avila clinic and the parking lot. And there, so they took each other's number and the pins for the BlackBerry, and we started a line of communication. We had to use people that were not so public, and at that moment it was a social leader whose name was Fernando Albán. So we knew Fernando Albán, and a couple days later we went to have our first meeting with Fernando Albán. He took us to a hacienda, and there we had Carlos Termini, Mr. Fernando Albán, myself, Mejias Laya, and Julio Borges. All the five we were all the five members of this moment, of this subversive cell. And at that meeting, we spoke how we were going to have our network relationships, how we were going to use a system to identify each other. So Julio Borges would be called El Quinto, or the fifth one. To Mejias Laya would be called McDonald's. Carlos would be Bob. Fernando would be called Suzuki, and I would be called Triple. And after that, we added some other names of that. Capriles would be Mariano. And how we called Maria Corina La Loca, or the crazy woman. And there we were there for some time until we reached the events of the month of August. And close to August, they told me that I should not go or assist any military activities. That there was going to be an attempt on an attempt against the president's life, so that I should go to no activities. I was calm. I just kept going to my activities, and I'll leave later. So on August the 4th, I had some responsibilities of that activity, and while being in that activity, I was called abruptly. They said I was desperate, telling me to leave, that get the hell out of there, that there was going to be an attempt on the president's life with the drones. I should leave immediately. So after half an hour, I left the activity, and we had the explosions and all those things that happened and that are well known. They're not things that are very well known. You know, the explosives, the drones that didn't make it here, and that is fundamentally what happened. So this traitor, who betrayed his honor, he betrayed his word, his oath, his condition as a military man, the friendship also that was given to him by people in the palace of Miraflores, was recruited by Julio Borges in order to plan the assassination attempt on Nicolas Maduro Moros. That is why I told you before that sitting on that negotiation table in the Dominican Republic, there was a plan already underway to kill our president. So, and even so, we could even see, we see that Borges ran over a child and he didn't even pick the child up. So a person who is capable of just leaving a child after being run over on the street, well, of course, he is capable of perpetrating all the acts for which he has been pointed out by his own accomplices. Ovidio Carrasco,
enlazado con
linked to,
Fernando Albán.
related to Fernando Albán.
Debe abrirse una investigación
An investigation
nueva
should begin. A new investigation
acerca del fallecimiento
should be
de
performed
Fernando
on the
Albán.
death of Fernando Albán.
Debe establecerse porque Albán era
It
el
must be
enlace directo
established
con
because
Carrasco.
Albán was the direct link to our mole, to
Era
Albán,
socio de Carrasco,
to
tenía una
Carrasco.
empresa de tortas.
They were
muy bien.
associates.
Eran miles y
They
miles
had
de dólares
a cake
que depositaban en esa empresa de tortas.
cake factory, a
quién
cake
era
company, and there were millions and
La
millions
administradora
that
de
were
la
invested
empresa
in
de
that
tortas de Carrasco y de Albán, la esposa de Fernando Albán.
enterprise. And who was the director? Well, Mr. Albán's
Repito, les iba
Albán's
muy, pero
wife.
muy bien.
Again, they were doing exceedingly
Entre las
well.
cosas que le pidió Carrasco
So,
Borges,
among the
además de dinero,
things that Carrasco
supuesta
Borges
residencia en los Estados Unidos de
for money,
Norteamérica,
well, of course, was a residence in the United States,
para
as well as
sus hijas
and a
en
couple spots for his
prestigiosas
daughters
universidades
in
norteamericanas, y ya
prestigious universities
se
in the United
encontró en las
States.
investigaciones
And
hasta
it
el
was found
recibo
later that
de pago en una prestigiosa universidad
that there was even a cash
norteamericana
receipt
de
for
a
a
manera de
prestigious
preinscripción
university
de
in the
una
United
de
States,
las
so
hijas de Carrasco.
for one of the daughters from Carrasco.
El concejal
So
Wilmer
the councilor Wilmer Castro,
exalcalde del municipio
also former
Carolín,
mayor
perdón,
of the Carolín
que
municipality,
presenta
is the one
a
presented,
Albán
who
con
presents
Julio
Albán
Borges
with
en el
Julio
año
Borges
2013,
in the year of
y a partir
2013.
de allí
And
se
from
empieza
then,
a dar el proceso
we start with the
para
process
pasando la información a
to
Borges
pass
para
on
decirle
the
que
information
perpetre
to
sus
Borges
actos golpistas contra Venezuela,
and to
incluida la
perpetrate
Operación Jericó
his
del año
coup
2014,
activities
incluido
in
todos los golpes
2014, and
militares
also including
que
all
intentaron
the military coup
entre
attempts
julio
that were
del año,
attempted
junio, perdón, del año 2017
in
y
June
ahora,
of 2017,
enero, febrero
and
del año
as much as
2019,
and up
y
until
para
now to
colaborar
January
con
and
el
February of
homicidio en
2019,
grado de frustración.
and also to collaborate
investigaciones
with the
señalan
attempt on
que
the president's
incluso-
life. So investigations show
que incluso
that even
Carrasco facilitó
Carrasco was
proceso
even there
para que
to
los
facilitate the
drones pudieran
process
atacar
for the
la
drones to
tarima
attack
presidencial el pasado
the
4
the
de
president's
agosto.
podium in
Y
August
también
4th,
queda
2018.
perfectamente claro
It is
que
also
quien dirigió
abundantly clear
todo el
that
proceso
the
magnicidio en grado de
the
frustración
persons who
fue el señor
managed
Julio
this process
De
was
hecho,
mainly Julio
otra de las
Borges.
confesiones que hizo también el señor
In fact,
Carrasco,
within the confessions of
que
Mr. Carrasco, it is also
ustedes
seen that
recuerdan que de manera tradicional,
you will remember,
el
traditionally
desfile
speaking, that
con motivo del
the
aniversario de la Guardia
parade
Nacional,
with the
generalmente
anniversary of the
ocurre
National
o en el patio de la
Guard
Academia Militar
tends
o
to take
en
place
la
in
Avenida
the
Monumental de los Próceres.
the
cambia el sitio del
Monumental
desfile militar,
Avenida Monumental de los
Y quien le
Próceres.
comunica a Borges
And
dónde iba a hacerse el desfile,
The man in
es
charge of
Ovidio.
confirming the place of that parade was
Queda
Carrasco.
plenamente establecido.
It was well
Así que-
established here. So,
Un asesino como usted, señor Borges,
and a murderer
Debería
like you,
empezar
and
a
such
dejar
as
la
you,
hipocresía.
Julio Borges, you should take that.
democracia nada,
You should.
ayuda humanitaria nada,
You are quite a hypocrite. I
Pura y
mean, it is
simplemente
not about democracy or
la violencia,
humanitarian
el
aid. It
asesinato,
is all about
la
violence, murder,
agredir la
death,
Constitución.
acts of aggression
¿Qué va a
against our
decir ahora?
Constitution.
Si sus
So
propios
what will
cómplices
you say now?
Lo delataron de manera
That your
voluntaria.
own accomplices have been
Si Garcia Palomo lo señala de manera directa.
have exposed you. Garcia Palomo
Sí.
calls you directly.
4 o 5 años después, quedan
If 4 or
evidencias. Usted
5
dijo que
years
Patricia
later,
Poleo mentía. No, mentía usted. Patricia
you
Poleo
know,
decía la verdad.
Patricia Polay said that she was a
Usted se
liar, and it
metió en
turns
el
out that
golpe,
she was
metió a
telling
los
the truth.
militares, a
That
unos capitanes
you
en el
involved
golpe.
captains
Uno
and
de esos capitanes, por cierto,
military
era pareja de Patricia
staff.
Poleo, por eso que Patricia Poleo lo odia
And
tanto.
that is why Patricia Polay hates you so much.
Nos metió en el golpe y como
You
hace
put
usted
them
siempre,
in the military coup in the
Se
same
tiró
way
del
you
golpe.
always
y
do.
fue
I mean,
llorando
you
en la
didn't
Casa
show
Nauca, así
up,
que usted no tenía nada que ver
and
en
you
el
came
llamado
back
golpe,
home
sí tenía que
crying
ver.
and
Sí
saying you had
mostró los
nothing to do with it.
objetivos que debían
And
ser bombardeados.
you showed
Y
the
ese es su patrón de
objectives
conducta.
that were to
¿Por
be
qué se
bombarded.
piró
And
de
that's
República Dominicana directo para
that is your
Bogotá?
behavior pattern.
Porque ya sabía que venía
Why would you go straight to
el
Bogota?
magnicidio,
Because
porque
you
lo estaba
already knew
organizando.
that it was underway. He was organizing the coup. He was organizing the attempt on Maduro's life. Now Carrasco's in jail. He's in custody, as Garcia Palomo's in custody, and you have your millions of dollars in Bogota and in Washington. Thank you very much.